All right, so Biden pulled a Swalwell. Remember when Representative Swalwell basically said your guns wouldn't do anything anyway because the U.S. government has nukes? So stop your insistence on keeping all your guns. Well, Biden more or less used the same line, saying that if you're going to take on the U.S. government, you'll need F-15s and maybe some nuclear weapons. I mean, first off, no, you don't need any of those things. Obviously, it's been pointed out before, but the Middle East and Vietnam prove you don't need any of that stuff. You can cause significant damage with the element of surprise and some ingenuity. But I would add something else that I don't hear mentioned too much, and that is, if a war broke out on U.S. soil, as Biden said would happen if you try anything, forgetting the fact that recruitment in the military would drastically drop, partly probably due to people being fed up with us relentlessly bombing countries overseas, I think that recruitment rates would drop even more if they began firing on or dropping bombs on U.S. citizens. But besides that, the U.S. military would have an even tougher time fighting against U.S. citizens here on U.S. soil, because when we're over in the Middle East, for example, everything the military needs can easily be produced and transported to where they need to be. There is almost no risk to the production and transportation of any military equipment in the U.S. itself. And when it's initially transported to the Middle East, they've got it. But when that equipment is then used out on the field, that's where the risk really comes in. Well, that would be true in the U.S., but the production and transportation itself would be under constant risk as well. There's an added layer of risk to their movements. So much so that it's not in any sense improbable that it could be halted by a few clever people. Not to mention gas and oil. Problems could arise within that realm as well, as I bet they would. So it wouldn't be as easy as Biden is making it out to be for the U.S. military. Now, as far as nukes, there's no need for me to say too much about it. It's been covered before, but of course, the U.S. government has no interest in nuking the U.S. It wouldn't happen. They don't want to destroy what they need to operate, and a nuke would not only destroy roads, bridges, parts of the energy grid, it would not only radiate where the bomb was dropped, but unpredictably bring that radiated fallout all over the place, depending quite literally on where the wind blows. So they're not going to be using nukes. They have no interest in ruling over an irradiated pile of rubble. So Biden is ridiculous for bringing it up, just as Swalwell was. It's a stupid threat. Although not for nothing, the idea behind what Biden said here is to deliver the message that you might as well stop resisting so much, because the government has that ability to instantaneously vaporize life in an instant. So let's be clear, this was a clinically psychotic thing for him to say. It's insane. Also, not for nothing, I mentioned this on Twitter, it's a bit of a side note, but I wonder what would have happened if Trump said something like this. I couldn't help but have that cross my mind, honestly. I'd be willing to bet it would be trending on Twitter for weeks, and the legacy media would be reporting on it nonstop, and there would probably be talks about Trump's removal from office within the hour of him making these comments. Just something interesting to think about, especially considering that it's no longer trending after just a couple hours. The other thing I wanted to mention, as you're seeing here, that isn't it kind of funny, the contrast between these two statements about January 6th being this, assault on the United States? On one hand, you can't say that the U.S. government is invulnerable, or you at least need F-15s and nukes to pose a threat. But January 6th was this grievous and existential threat to the U.S. government. That's the way it's been presented to us by politicians in the legacy media anyway. Yeah, January 6th, which ended up being a few hundred unarmed weirdos with weird-ass signs taking selfies in Nancy Pelosi's office. That actually wasn't that big of a threat. It was newsworthy, no doubt, I can give you that, but not this great threat to the peaceful transition of power in our constitutional republic, as if the likes of Biden care about that anyway. But it's funny, some people saying both of these things can be true if you just think about it with your, critical thinking faculties. Actually, that isn't true. Both of these really cannot be true at the same time. Joe Biden has described January 6th as this great threat to the country, right? How can you consider it a great threat to the country or democracy or our institutions, etc.? How can it be that big of a threat if, as Biden says, what you really need is F-15s and maybe a couple nukes to realistically take on the U.S. government? Either January 6th was really this weird little temper tantrum that won't and didn't amount to nearly anything, which is true, or it was this big threat that it could have taken us down. In which case, if that is true, Biden is absolutely wrong about needing F-15s and nukes to take the U.S. government on. Because after all, look at these people taking selfies and vandalizing offices. They almost apparently brought the U.S. government to heel, according to Biden. They didn't need F-15s and nukes. Hell, they didn't even need small arms. They were unarmed. Could it be that January 6th was a joke and doesn't even register as a threat, and at the same time, the U.S. government is not some immovable object we have no hope of ever changing or overcoming? I think both of those statements are true. But that is all for now. Like, subscribe, share this video. It's extremely appreciated, and take it easy.